to me. You're not a cadet, you're an officer. Sorry, I'm the young officer that just introduced me. And before I begin my remarks, I would like to take a moment to recognize this remarkable young group of people here today and ask you to join me in a round of applause, not only for them, but for all the servicemen and women that are here with us. So why am I here today? Well, actually, Kenya, who's up on the stage, asked me to speak at today's ceremony. And Kenya is truly one of the most exceptional students that I have ever had. A young lady as equally committed to the pursuit of higher education as she is to service for her country. Young people like Kenya are few and far between in today's day and age, which is why it is such a great honor for me personally to be here today, not only in her presence, but the presence of so many young people like herself, all of whom are gathered here to celebrate the first of many incredible achievements that they will all most certainly attain in the years ahead. In fact, I must admit, in light of what Kenya and all you future officers have already achieved and what you've committed to undertaking as you begin your military careers, I feel quite unworthy to be standing up here today addressing this audience. Any one of you would be an equally, if not more so, worthy speaker. And so I'm eternally grateful, not only to Kenya for the opportunity, but to all of you here who had less say in the selection process, but who will be listening nonetheless. This gratitude is part of what I would like to speak to you about this afternoon. I spent a lot of time thinking about what I would say today. I watched and read an uncountable number of commencement speeches on YouTube. I called upon my friends in every branch of service in every military across the world and asked them what they would want to hear on retrospect upon entering the armed forces. I consulted friends, family members, and even my staff. Admittedly, I spent an untold number of nights this past month simply lying awake, praying to be struck by some spark of divine inspiration. But in the end, I decided to simply go with what was in my heart. Motivated by the way in which I felt upon reading Kenya's email requesting that I speak today, I would like to share with you what I believe to be, in my opinion, and in my short 32 years on this mortal coil, to be the 4 most important life lessons that you should know, and the 4 most important characteristics that you can carry with you as you begin your new lives as officers in the greatest military in the world, the United States Armed Forces. These lessons include gratitude, humility, faith, and fearlessness. Now, I hope I don't embarrass Kenya when I speak of the first of 4 points, gratitude, but if I do, my sincerest apologies in advance. So I received an email from Kenya about a month ago, and she asked if I would consider speaking today. And in it she wrote, "I admired you as a professor and hope to at some point in my life reach your level of intelligence, patriotism, and courage as an educator and human rights activist. I consider no one else better for this position. Also, a woman has never been a guest speaker for any of my unit's graduations, and I'm devoted to changing such history." That last point, which I might add, further emphasizes how truly exceptional Kenya is. Now, to say that I was grateful for her request would be a vast understatement. It was a deep and penetrating gratitude, not only for her admiration, but for what she wanted me to help her achieve before she moved on to her bright and very prosperous career. But mostly I was grateful because of all the amazing people Kenya and the other cadets in the room have surely met during the course of their campus careers. She and they had chosen me, when in reality all I had done for her was to live my life in tandem with my beliefs. That is, having been given the opportunity to engage in such a wide breadth of educational opportunities, it was my responsibility, rather it was my duty, to educate others, to help others, and to uplift others, in hopes of making the world, even if only slightly, a better and wiser place. This was my service, a result of the gratitude that I felt for the life that I had been given. In no way did I believe, nor had I sought merit and recognition, or a hole in the stage. And yet here I am before you today, and my gratitude is endless. President John F. Kennedy tells us, as we express our gratitude, we must never forget that the highest appreciation is not to utter words, but to live by them. I argue that there is no greater embodiment of this truth than the lives that you have chosen to lead. Other Americans can sing the Star-Spangled Banner or pledge allegiance to the flag, but you have chosen not only song and pledge, but action in defense of our great nation. to express your gratitude as Americans and for America in a way so few, less than 0.5% of the national population, choose to do in our modern day and age. Your capacity for gratitude is one of your greatest strengths, and in turn, by recognizing this, your strengths will have a greater capacity. Service is in fact the highest expression of gratitude, whether we serve as friends, siblings, parents, bosses, mentors, volunteers, philanthropists, politicians, bureaucrats, educators, or as you have chosen to in uniform, as soldiers, sailors, and airmen and women. Service comes in many forms, but all service has a singular commonality, a singular goal, a singular purpose: to provide for others in order to achieve the greatest good. We serve because we are grateful for that goodness. There is no paycheck, no accolade, no speaking engagement, nor are there any medals, ribbons, insignias, or stripes that could ever supersede the moment when you realize that someone is grateful for what you've done on their behalf, directly, tangentially, or without perhaps even realizing it. It fills you with gratitude that bears no equal measure, and that feeling never leaves you. This country is deeply grateful for what you are about to do. Don't ever forget that. And don't let the feeling that you have at this moment ever leave you. Because you will not always feel grateful, nor will you always incur the gratitude of others. I have no doubt that most of your life you will confront a great deal of ingratitude, a great deal of adversity, a great many trials, and even more tribulations. But do not let that define you. Do not let that give you pause, nor let it make you reconsider or waver from the commitment that you are making today, that you have been making these past 4 or 5 years. Lest we forget, as the greatest living general, David Petraeus, reminds us, character is doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. But just as service is the highest expression of gratitude, so too is humility, the second lesson, the greatest attribute of those who serve. As a young man from Queens, New York, named Peter Parker, more commonly known as Spider-Man, was once advised, with great power comes great responsibility. And so it can be said, with great gratitude comes great humility. As real-life superheroes, humility is the greatest power you have to wield. Because it is only that superhero that abuses his or her power who becomes the story's villain. An antagonist rather than a protagonist does that abuse make. I recall the words of Ernest Hemingway, who once wrote, "There is nothing more noble in being superior to your fellow man. True nobility is being superior to your former self." Indeed, when we are humble, we find that our hearts and minds are more open to and better able to see the good in others. We are better able to uplift each other, and we more readily find success in our personal lives and community endeavors. Humility is the cog and the sprocket of life. It is simply, as Confucius tells us, the solid foundation of all virtue. Humility is about what is and not who is right. That is not to say it will always be easy to be humble, especially in some of the far-off places that you will travel to and with some of the very different people you might encounter on your way. But in my experience, when you are humble and you can see the good in others, they will more easily be able to find and see the same in you. This is truly important because common ground is the most critical component of any successful collaboration, friendship, or alliance. And in the same vein, it is the most important component of any lasting truce, armistice, or agreement that exists between peoples, militaries, and countries. And in this regard, your capacity for humility can sometimes be the difference between simply keeping the peace and having to fight for it. But life will not always prove to be so simple. Despite your best attempts at being humble, not even all the world's modesty will prevent the inevitable. And when the time comes for you to go to war and to fight for that peace, the highest calling of your chosen profession, and for that which you will now spend a lifetime preparing for, your humility, the deference you maintain in understanding that you have the power to take life as well as restore it, will be what separates those soldiers who are honored to follow orders and you officers who soldiers are honored to follow. And this brings me to my third lesson, faith. When you are called to fight, remember to keep faith. Faith is a necessity. Faith is a source of strength when we are weak. It is a source of inspiration when our souls are weary. It is a source of comfort when we are in distress. Faith is the will when we wane. Faith is the first step, Martin Luther King tells us, even when you don't see the entire staircase. Faith need not come from any form of institutional religion or some new age thought. Rather, faith is a commitment to a greater good. Whether that commitment is in one's faith in your family, your country, your duty, in humanity, in a God, or in some spark of divinity in the universe, it is faith in something greater than yourselves, which will be your sole guiding light in the most troubled of waters. Because it is to faith that we turn in times of trouble. When our resolve is tested, when we are asked to do things about which we are unsure, to achieve things requiring great courage and fortitude, far greater than our mere mortal selves. Indeed, Plato reminds us we are twice as armed if we fight with faith. We turn to faith when we are afraid, and it is in the comfort of whatever faith we hold that our fears are alleviated. And we find that inner greatness, that purpose for which we've been put here on this earth. It is through faith that we are made fearless. The fourth and final lesson I shall impart upon you today, and perhaps the most important of all. I'm reminded of a story that was recounted to me by my rabbi when I myself was confronted by a great deal of uncertainty and upheaval. A long time ago, in a tiny village on the outskirts of some Eastern European capital, there lived a very small Jewish community. The people were poor, and the only temple in the village was after many years in utter disrepair. One day, a young man from the village named Arik was passing by the temple gates when he saw the rabbi pacing back and forth, looking greatly distressed. Now, this young man, he had known the rabbi all his life. This rabbi presided over the religious needs of the community. Arik had been taught Hebrew by this rabbi. This rabbi had married his parents and his brothers. He had been at the births of his nieces and nephews. He'd stood alongside him at the graveside of his grandparents upon their passing. And so Arik stopped and he cried out, "Rabbi, you seem so burdened. What is wrong?" And the rabbi stopped pacing and turned to Arik and said, "Oh, my darling boy, there's nothing left in the coffers of the temple. And with the town drowning in such great poverty, I'm not sure how I'll be able to keep providing for those in need, and how I will continue to provide for the spiritual needs of our community." The rabbi went on to tell the boy, "I have prayed and prayed and prayed to God for a solution, but my prayers have gone unanswered. Alas, I have fallen on deaf ears." Now, upon hearing this story, Arik was, of course, outraged by this injustice. How could a man who had devoted his entire life to helping others be so ignored by God in his time of greatest need? Arik simply could not understand how this could be so, and so he came up with a plan. The young man went down to the local pub and gathered up all the unsavory types in the village, the drunkards, the fighters, the swindlers, the cheats, and all the petty criminals, and he brought them back up to the gates of the temple, and when he arrived, he cried out, "Rabbi, we have returned." And the rabbi came to the gates and looked out on the assembled crowd in disbelief and shock at the unpleasant and quite distasteful group before him. And he said to Arik, "Returned for what, my dear boy? And for what purpose need you these thugs and thieves?" And Arik said to the rabbi, "For what else but to break down the gates of heaven and ask God why your prayers have gone unanswered? And if he doesn't have a good reason, petition he fulfill them in full." Now that is what my grandmother would have called chutzpah, what's more commonly known as audacity, or what I like to refer to as fearlessness. But not just any kind of fearlessness. The fearlessness to do what's right in the face of injustice. Now, I'm not advising you go break down the pearly gates when you don't get your way or you get yelled at by a commanding officer. That might be too much chutzpah even for my grandmother. But this story does have two important lessons that I would like to impart upon you today. One, don't ever be afraid to do what you know is just, what you know is righteous, and what you know is your duty to do. And two, when it comes to getting done what you know is just, what you know is righteous, what you know is your duty to do, don't be afraid to take chances. Don't be afraid to put it all on the line. Don't be afraid to be big and bold and strong. Don't be afraid to lead when the moment demands leadership. President John F. Kennedy once said, "We have nothing to fear but fear itself." And President Kennedy did not fear big, bold, and strong decisions. And these are the type of decisions that you will be asked to make, that which is your duty to make in the years ahead. And when that time comes, believe that you not only must do so, but that you can do so. Because you embody all that is good and all that is great about the idea and ideals that have made America and continue to make America a righteous, just, and moral force for humanity. You are the next generation of great leadership. Today, you inherit this legacy of greatness. Use it wisely, but use it with the belief that you are wise. Before I conclude my remarks, I want to tell the commissioned officers, each and every single one of you, and to the assembled family members here today, that I and our country is so eternally grateful for all you have already sacrificed and all that you will in service to the American people, to the United States of America, and for all of which democracy stands. for all which is big, bold, and strong, and most importantly, for that which is unafraid to stand for what is just, for what is righteous, and for what your duty demands of you. God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America.